Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to 25 years of Scifest. Very special evening this evening. Kicking off Scifest, which will be a virtual event over the next few months. So very excited. I think any anniversary is a good one, but 25 years of solid science engagement is certainly one to be proud of. My name is Angus Patterson. I'm from the National Research Foundation, who has also been working with Scifest for many of these years. And tonight we'll be kicking off the celebrations, and the theme of Scifest this year is creative science. It's going to be looking at how we use science and develop science through innovation in terms of driving sustainable and inclusive economic growth. We have a great lineup, not only tonight, but over the next few months in terms of Scifest. There haven't been very many good things about COVID, but certainly what it has done is driven an innovative approach to communication. And nowadays, we used to have events within the auditorium at the Grahamstown Foundation. And now we can have events like this where we reach out not only within Makanda, but within South Africa and internationally. And certainly one of the few things that the pandemic has brought is a real drive in innovation of how we communicate. And therefore, one of the positives coming out of COVID-19 has been the fact that we can reach so many more people in terms of driving science communication and showing how important science has been. And let's face it, over the last 18 months, I don't think science could be brought to the forefront more than the COVID-19 pandemic. Tonight, we've got some old faces presenting, some new faces presenting. We're going to be starting off in terms of a welcome from Anya Fourie, who we all know and was part of Scifest. We've got Dr. Phil Madrada speaking, the DG, the longest standing, if I understand, longest standing DG in government, and certainly a DG that I've reported to for my whole career. So it's going to be great having Dr. Madrada speak to us. We have Professor Janice Limson from Rhodes University speaking about the future of science festivals. And then the Brian Wilmot lecture, the keynote speaker. We're very fortunate in securing Professor Marwala, who's the Vice Chancellor of the University of Johannesburg. And he'll be speaking on harnessing creativity, innovation, and emerging technologies to address the impact of COVID-19 in Africa. And when I read his bio before he comes on, you'll see how lucky we are to secure some time from him in terms of understanding the importance of emerging technologies in the way we're going to cope with technology in the future and COVID. We're very lucky to also have Nombasa, who are going to be providing us with some entertainment between the speakers. They're also from Makanda, so homegrown. And then we're going to finish off with Monica Newton, the CEO of the National Arts Festival and the Grahamstown Foundation, who will be giving a word of thanks. In terms of questions and answers, I really do implore the audience to use the question and answer function because we'll be going to those and we'll be answering both Professor Limson's and Professor Marwala's questions together afterwards. Sorry for the break there. The last thing that I do want to say is that all of you are ambassadors. This is not a launch where we go into the 10 days of Scifest or anything like that. Scifest is going to be over the next few months, and therefore you all got to be ambassadors in terms of driving Scifest, in terms of encouraging people to link in with Scifest and to drive science engagement. We all know that science in many corners of the world has taken a knock over the last few years. And certainly in terms of science engagements, it's up to us to drive the science communication to all and sundry. So to kick off, the first person that we've got is to give a welcome is Anya Fourie. Anya Fourie, we all know, she was a friend of Scifest way back in the 90s. She's seen the whole development of Scifest. She was a manager and a director. She then got involved in the Square Kilometre Array, which all of you know is one of our key flagship programs in the country in terms of radio astronomy, and is now project director in the US for the US National Radio Astronomy Observatory, looking at impact and also science engagement from that perspective. So I'd like to hand over to Anya Fourie, who will be providing a welcome for the program.
Thank you very much, and good evening, Angus, Dr. Mjwacha, Professor Limson, Professor Marwala, Ms. Newton, all our other distinguished guests, and friends of Scifest Africa around the world, wherever you are. As the guest curator for this year's program, but also former director, and more importantly, I think, a lifelong groupie of Scifest Africa and science festivals, it gives me such pleasure to welcome you to the official opening of the 25th consecutive edition of South Africa's National Science Festival. My own involvement in Scifest Africa started in 1997, which was the first year of the festival, when as a first-year journalism not interested in science at all student who was desperate for an additional source of income, I worked as a Sci friend during the festival under the watchful eye of the first director, Bugs Wilmot, manager Eve Cambray, and I'm pretty sure at that stage, head Sci friend, Professor Limson. And little did I know that this festival would set me and so many other individuals on an unpredictable path of discovery. And that 25 years later, I would be working in a field where I use astronomy to drive the broadening participation of underrepresented minorities in science. Over those 25 years, many of us have watched Scifest Africa grow from an event, and I remember it clearly, with no title sponsor, consisting of a handful of events listed in a black and white program, and that welcomed 15,000 visitors, to an event recognized by South Africa's Department of Science Innovation, consisting of over 600 events listed both on an interactive website and in a program that you could use for a doorstop, and welcoming more than 65,000 visitors from across the African continent and abroad. This growth was driven always by one vision, and that was to be the leading festival of its kind on the African continent. But to be a good leader, one must listen. And this year, Scifest Africa continues to reinvent itself by hearing its beneficiaries who are eager for relevant, quality content that can be consistently delivered online, but also in packaged format throughout the year, and including those beneficiaries in a process to co-design this new structure and content of the festival. So this year, the 2021 festival program will therefore be on offer not only for 1 week of the year, but throughout the year, and it will celebrate various themes. This past year was marked by the simultaneous, as if one thing wasn't enough, dramatic evolution of the COVID-19 pandemic and other major global issues such as climate change, discrimination and exclusion, and major geopolitical conflict. The far-reaching consequences of all these issues have highlighted the urgency with which we as humankind need to apply creative thinking in order to innovate ourselves out of the challenges of inequality and the resulting vulnerability that is faced by millions on a daily basis. This kind of innovation requires that we recognize the value and potential of all knowledge, that we address long-standing exclusion and silent voices in that process, and that we co-design purpose-driven interventions at the intersection of culture, business, and science. The United Nations therefore declared this year as the International Year of Creative Economy for Sustainable Development, in recognition of the role of creative economic activities, or activities where knowledge is the main source of value, as a powerful force for the transformation for greater societal benefit. Just up my street. This resolution also highlights the importance of the creative economy in achieving the UN's 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. Those goals, as you can tell, need to be achieved in only 9 years from now. So in 2021, Scifest Africa will collaborate with a natural partner, South Africa's National Arts Festival, to celebrate creativity and its role in stimulating innovation and entrepreneurship, promoting economic diversification and sustainable growth, and empowering the vulnerable and promoting, importantly, and probably most importantly, diversity, equity, and inclusion. This year's festival program will promote the awareness, understanding, and appreciation of science through a journey into creativity, from how the brain creates the mind, the nature of creativity, different ways of knowing and challenging conventional wisdom. We will celebrate creative citizens that use living elephant fences in the Kalahari, look at how the deaf can use wearable technology to feel sounds in their environment. We look at the role of design in deciding what we take to space and what we leave behind. And we look at the application of technology for the rollout of COVID-19 and other vaccines in rural areas. We will also place specific focus on the fourth industrial revolution, which, in case you haven't heard about it, has seen a shift to the use of data to create value. And more importantly, how we ensure equal access to that data and the insights which it will bring. This year, Scifest Africa will also kick off its Festival in a Box program, where festival staff will work closely with our partner schools throughout the country to not only train high school learners in science communication, but also to have these trained students produce professional, packaged science content that can be distributed both online and to high schools throughout the country. The Scifest Africa Advisory Committee, the backbone of this project, the Scifest Africa staff, and I look forward to rolling out this very interactive, creative program for Scifest Africa 2021. Thank you very much, Angus.
Thank you, Anya. Certainly, having known Anya's involvement for so many years in Scifest, I never thought I would put a woman of Anya's stature down as a groupie, but seeing that she self-declared herself as a Scifest groupie, that's what she will be known forthwith. But anyway, thank you very much, Anya.
It's a proud badge.
You are a very good Scifest groupie. We're very lucky to have the Director General of Department of Science and Innovation, and I'll read you through what Dr. Phil Madrada, excuse me. Phil always laughs at me when I do this, and I try to have a speech impediment. Dr. Phil Madrada, he holds a BSc, MSc, and PhD from the University. Come on, Phil, stop laughing at me. From the University of the Witwatersrand. His academic career serving as a professor of science and technology policy at the University of Pretoria. He's had physics lectureships at the universities of Witwatersrand and Fort Hare. Phil has published and presented numerous papers on physics, technology analysis, and technology foresight processes. His professional experience includes working as a director in the former Department of Arts, Culture, Science and Technology, serving on their very important panel, which is the National Advisory Council on Innovation, or NACI, a group executive for research and development and strategic human capital development at the CSIR. As part of many of his contributions, Phil has led the team that conducted the South African Technology Foresight Project. The outputs were presented to President Thabo Mbeki in 2000. He's also provided a lot of input in terms of the development of scenarios for South Africa for the years 2004 to 2014 through the Office of the President. I think the most important role, because it's been my interaction with Phil, is he serves as the Director General of the Department of Science and Innovation. And if I stand corrected, is the longest standing DG within government at the moment. And his tenure has seen a large amount of stability. And we've seen where the DSI has grown over the years through having a consistent hand on the wheel. His responsibilities include the development and implementation of South Africa's science, technology, and innovation policy, which has seen a major shift with the development of the white paper in 2018. And Phil will be driving us in a new era in terms of innovation and certainly Science for Impact. He sits on the board of the World of Platinum and also on the Square Kilometre Array organization. And it gives me utmost pleasure to ask Phil to take us forward in the official opening remarks. Over to you, Dr. Madrada.
Thanks very much, Program Director. You don't have to worry, Angus. I'm not particularly concerned. I know it's always tricky to pronounce my surname. Anya, it's a pleasure to see you as well here in this meeting. Executive Mayor of Makana Municipality, I'm told, is with us, Councillor Mzugisi Mpahlwa. The Vice Chancellor of the University of Johannesburg, I saw him, Professor Chilizi Marwala. Chairperson of Boards of the Grahamstown Foundation and the National Arts Festival, Mr. Ayanda Mchekula. Members of the Scifest Africa National Advisory Board. Chief Executive Officer, I hope he's joined us, of the National Research Foundation, Dr. Fulufelo Nelamondo and his colleagues. Representatives of foreign missions in attendance, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. After hearing what you shared with us, Anya, in terms of what this program would look like, it's a real pity that we are having this event virtually. But it is my honor, nevertheless, and privilege to speak to you on this important day in the history of Scifest Africa. As I'm sure you already know, we are not only marking the opening of the 2021 edition of Scifest Africa, we are also celebrating the festival's Silver Jubilee. The chosen theme for this year's Scifest Africa 2021, as we've had, Creative Science, requires of us to think of the application of science not only in creative ways, but also in a way that creatively responds to the various day-to-day challenges that we face, both as a country and humanity. Since the dawn of the democratic dispensation, we as government have been implementing a number of legislative and policy measures which were aimed at improving the functionality of our national system of innovation, making it more agile. And as you know, in 2019, we adopted a white paper on science, technology, and innovation, which emphasizes, amongst others, the need to increasing the focus on inclusivity, transformation, and linkages in the national system of innovation, innovation for inclusive development, including a greater focus on social and grassroots innovation, developing an enabling environment for innovation and enhancing the innovation culture in society and in government. Big tasks that are ahead of us. To enable the implementation of our 2019 white paper on science, technology, and innovation, we are now in the process of finalizing the decadal plan for science, technology, and innovation. This plan is also informed by the South Africa Foresight Exercise for Science, Technology, and Innovation 2030. And this foresight exercise identified 9 science, technology, and innovation domains for particular focus, namely 1, the circular economy, 2, education for the future, 3, sustainable energy, 4, the future of society, 5, health innovation, 6, high-tech industrialization, 7, ICTs and smart systems, 8, nutrition security, and 9, lastly, water security. Through the decadal plan, we intend to usher in a new era of science, technology, and innovation policy that is targeted at increasing the responsiveness of the national system of innovation and its contribution to socio-economic imperatives and national priorities. We believe some of the key elements are in place for us to move beyond just having an efficient national system of innovation, but also one that serves as a catalyst for national development. We do emphasize that room for people who want to do science for the sake of science will be there. We therefore view the work that has been done by Scifest over the years as a critical enabler for the kinds of things we wish to achieve through our national system of innovation. And this is our view because, like us, the Scifest recognizes that much of the goals we have set for ourselves are not going to be realized if we do not make the involvement and development of young people a central part of our work. It is for this end and other reason that it pleases us to note that over the 25 years of its existence, Scifest Africa has evolved considerably, growing from a provincial to a national festival. Equally pleasing is the coincidence that Scifest was founded in the same year in which South Africa's first science white paper was adopted, that is in 1996. Over the years, Scifest has served as an informal academy from which others have learned and drawn inspiration to establish similar initiatives to serve their fellow citizens. Today, we can count not less than 5 other festivals in the country that were inspired by Scifest. As we celebrate this milestone in the evolution of science engagement in South Africa, we cannot forget the various organizations such as SASO, whose sponsorships over the years have contributed so much to the long-term growth and stability of Scifest Africa. It is also important to state that the 25-year period we are celebrating today has not been smooth sailing for Scifest Africa. There were difficult times, largely due to the withdrawal of primary sponsors, which could have led to the total collapse of the festival. I am pleased to say that this potentially disastrous eventuality, which would have robbed the country of such a valuable initiative, was averted by the timeous intervention of the Department of Science and Innovation. Ladies and gentlemen, we are living in fast-changing times, and our world today faces many daunting challenges. The exciting part about such changes and challenges is that our efforts to address them broaden our horizons, creating new opportunities for growth and collaboration. Years back, it was almost unthinkable that so many countries around the world, fueled by the drive for individual competitive edge, could come together to seek solutions to challenges brought about by their self-serving activities. We have seen, for instance, the establishment and growth of the Conference of Parties of the United Nations, bringing nations together to address the common challenge of global climate change. While we cannot generalize, most of the changes and challenges that the world is experiencing today are in many ways driven by science. To quote the Understanding Science project of the University of California at Berkeley, open quote, "Science affects us all, every day of the year, from the moment we wake up all day long and through the night. The modern world would not be modern at all without the understanding of technology enabled by science," close quote. With science being thus interwoven with people's lives, governments all over the world are under pressure to make sure that science is accessible to the public. It is with this understanding in mind that the Department of Science and Innovation, through the new white paper on science and technology and innovation, has recommitted itself to a national program to build a society that is science aware and science literate. The new white paper identifies several measures to strengthen the science engagement program that the department has led for more than 2 decades now. In particular, I would like to expand a bit on these intervention measures. Over the years, across various sectors, the number of stakeholders and role players engaged in activities promoting public awareness and understanding of science has grown significantly. This is commendable. However, because this growth took place in an uncoordinated fashion, we've ended up with fragmented efforts by some stakeholders and partners in the national system of innovation. To achieve a better science engagement outcome, this shortcoming must be addressed. It is for this reason that in the first quarter of 2021, the National Research Foundation Act was amended to incorporate a science engagement mandate. As a result, the national coordinating role for science engagement has been assigned to the South African Agency for Science and Technology Advancement, properly known as SASTA, a unit of the National Research Foundation. The aim of this intervention is to achieve a well-coordinated science engagement system, and through this improved management of the program performance data and the balanced reach of science engagement activities, hopefully, will be realized. Ladies and gentlemen, with the advent of COVID-19 pandemic, research and development over the years were not just beginning to bear fruit, but they played a big part in informing our response to the COVID-19 pandemic. As a result of these investments, the work of our scientists was able to inform government policy and its overall response. This is why it was pleasing to listen to Professor Salim Abdul Karim, the director of the Center for AIDS Program of Research in South Africa, on radio and television, as he was helping South Africans to understand the various issues around COVID-19. What I find so striking about Professor Karim is that whenever he communicates scientific information to the public, he does so by using simple, straightforward language that is completely free of technical jargon. This is because he understands that technical jargon should be reserved for his engagement with his peers. Communicating science in this simple way is a skill, and one that we would like to help our scientists to acquire. Accordingly, we will be working closely with our counterparts in the Department of Higher Education and Training to establish capacity in public universities to train our scientists and science communication practitioners in basic science communication skills. The Department of Science and Innovation and its various partners invest considerable resources in promoting public awareness of science. This calls on us to regularly assess the difference that such efforts are making in society. To enable this, we have developed a science engagement monitoring and evaluation framework, and based on this framework, we decided that an impact study would be conducted every 5 years. The study will be known as the South African Public Relations with Science Survey, and the first survey is planned for 2022. The Human Sciences Research Council, which is responsible for system-wide science engagement monitoring and evaluation, will conduct the survey. Among other things, the survey will reveal the extent to which the collective contributions of the various players in science engagement, Scifest Africa among them, have changed citizens' perceptions of science and raised their level of scientific knowledge. In conclusion, we value our partnership with Scifest and hope that it will grow stronger with time. We also commend the work Scifest has been doing since inception and wish to urge that you maintain the high quality of the science engagement work that you've been doing. Thank you very much for your attention. With these words, I declare the 2021 edition of Scifest Africa officially open. I wish everyone a fruitful and enjoyable experience of the event. Thank you.
imizamo iyenziwa unqa yinqubela mandingabilikhoboka umntu ongakhululekanga imizamo iyenziwa unqa yinqubela ndithi masenze into ebonakalayo sale ukungabi nesakhono inyathi buzwa kwabaphambili imbeko mayibe phambili ndithi masenze into ebonakalayo sale ukungabi nesakhono inyathi buzwa kwabaphambili imbeko mayibe phambili xa ndintyuntya ndityibilika ndichutshiswa yinto endiphetheyo ndilala ndingalele sombalo mthombo wesakhono xa ndintyuntya ndityibilika ndichutshiswa yinto endiphetheyo ndilala ndingalele sombalo mthombo wesakhono ndilala ndingalele ndilala ndingalele ndileqwa lixesha ngoba ndimele ukunditshutshisa lindombelela kade shiya elubhongo lutsho utshaba isaqhubekeka lemfazwe ndileqwa lixesha ngoba ndimele ukunditshutshisa lindombelela kade shiya elubhongo lutsho utshaba isaqhubekeka lemfazwe
Oh, wow. I don't know which was better. The good news is that we're going to have more Nombasa later on, but really moving. What an amazing voice. To my DG, yeah, what can I say? That's why you've been the DG for so many years, since 2006. Thanks for giving us an outline as to where we're going within the science system. All important for science to become so much more relevant to all South Africans, and to answer specific questions that we need answered as a nation. So thanks so much to the DG and also to Nombasa. Moving on now, we have Professor Janice Limson from Rhodes University. Janice is a professor of biotechnology at Rhodes University in Makhanda. She holds the Department of Science and Innovation, National Research Foundation, South African Research Chair, or SARCHI, in Biotechnology Innovation and Engagement, and serves as the Director of the Biotechnology Innovation Center at Rhodes. Her research focuses on the development of products and processes with direct societal impact. As you can see, that's coming through very strongly in this Scifest. This includes areas of water treatment and bioremediation and the development of rapid diagnostic tests for healthcare management in remote areas. Through her work as chair, she studies how direct science engagement with communities regarding research and technology holds multiple benefits for communities, science students, and ultimately for the successful development and deployment of beneficial products, real science to society. Funded by UNICEF, her team has recently focused on developing diagnostic tests that may provide early warnings for high-risk pregnancies in remote areas. She's a former recipient of a Highway Africa New Media Award for Journalism, the National Science and Technology Forum Award for Outstanding Contribution to Science, Engineering and Technology in South Africa, and is twice, not once, twice featured as one of South Africa's Male and Guardian Young Leaders. In 2019, she received the National Intellectual Property Management Office Award for being amongst the top intellectual property creators in higher education in South Africa. She's been inducted into the Academy of Science of South Africa, serves as an associate editor for a number of journals and boards, and is obviously part of Scifest Africa. So Janice, over to you. Janice will be speaking on the future of science festivals in Africa. Janice.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. I'd like to explore a little bit about where we've been over the last 25 years with science festivals on the continent, what it's meant for science, for society, and certainly what it means going ahead. So if we take a moment just to reflect on science, it really impacts, and certainly fields such as biotechnology impacts on every aspect of what we do. It impacts on the way we live, our food, our water, the way we communicate, the way we work, all aspects of our life on the planet now and certainly in the future. It impacts on research in health, drugs, disease monitoring, rapid disease detection. It impacts on research in agriculture for better crops, cleaner water, energy, and biodiversity as well. And one of the things that we realized within the field, within our field, is that we have a serious disconnect between science and what society needs and wants. This has been a major challenge for us as scientists, is what research areas should be focused on? What are the challenges that communities face? Are students motivated to develop products with society in mind? And despite our science engagement efforts, there remains a large gap between scientists and the public. And this provides a space for a global movement in engaged research, or rather responsible research and innovation. And this is a space where community engagement becomes part and parcel of the way in which we do scientific research. So two-way engagement versus one-way, there are much more benefits for scientists, for science, and for communities when there's direct engagement. And this is certainly a part of the National Research Foundation's Engaged Research Program, which seeks to involve communities and stakeholders in all parts of the scientific research and innovation process. This has also been a part of my SACHI chair, is how we embed engagement with communities into our research. So how do we do science engagement? So for our research in water treatment, this has involved our students engaging communities at the earliest stages of their research, as well as at prototype development, with the aim being that we're developing products that better serve our communities. This is also impacted in our research in rapid diagnostic tests, where our students have engaged healthcare workers to establish the needs and the challenges in order to better develop these rapid diagnostic tests, finding out what the situation is like on the ground before we even begin doing product development. Now, conducting this kind of engaged research has its challenges, and one of the biggest ones is that most scientists are not comfortable with engaged research, engaging communities, and certainly not in assessing the benefits of those engagements. And I feel this is where science festivals such as Scifest Africa have an important role to play. they are by their very nature engaged. They tick all the right boxes. With Scifest Africa, certainly there's been direct engagement between public and scientists, and it's certainly been a space where learning can happen in a fun and sociable environment. The festivals are hands-on, they're engaged, and there's spaces for active learning for all age groups. Certainly many of the Science Festival activities have helped to create informal spaces, relaxed spaces where this kind of engagement between scientists and the public can occur. Events such as Cyber, Speed Data Scientists, which my students have been engaged in, and certainly multiple opportunities for the public to meet and engage with experts in the field. More recently, Scifest launched a Science is Listening series, which I was involved in, and this provided a space where the public were invited to tell scientists which research they believe is important. And this involved inviting scientists from water, environment, and health, and then inviting the public to sit around a table in a relaxed environment to discuss these opportunities. One of the other things that our research has shown, and certainly in collaboration with our colleagues here at Rhodes, is that the Science Festival has meant more than a space for science and the public to engage, but it's also been a place where science communication, or rather a community of practice of science communication, science communicators, has been nurtured over the last 25 years. And that this community of practice has contributed to the overall science communication ecosystem in South Africa. In some of my research, we also wish to explore, what does this mean for our students? What are the specific benefits, if any, for them to engage with communities? And our recent research has interestingly shown that even simple or straightforward engagements such as Speed Data Scientist provided opportunities where our students were able to affirm their choice of career as a scientist. Our science students said that it was like looking at yourself in the mirror, talking to yourself 10 years ago, reminding me of my purpose as a scientist and why I entered research. Importantly, it also impacted their sense of identity. Our science students would not normally think about themselves as scientists, but once when they were in the public, that is when they realized that they were a scientist, when reflecting in that particular moment. And this was important because I think it helped inspire our students to continue in the field, as they said, and it certainly helped with their motivation. Interestingly for us, it also suggested that our students were more committed to making a difference in the community. If we look at where we are at right now, there are multiple challenges: climate change, drought, global warming, food and water insecurity, global pandemic, alternative truths and misinformation. And this means that we need to be doing science that addresses these grand challenges, and certainly in an ethical and sustainable way. We need scientists that are engaged. We need to nurture the science and society interface. And this is absolutely crucial for the way in which we do science going forward. I feel that science festivals have quite an important and central role to play in that. The festivals provide an established space for the public to meet and interact with scientists, and it is a trusted space for science engagement that can help address all the misinformation, and a space to provide balanced views. It's certainly also a space for scientists to share, interact, to listen and engage. It's a space for science communicators to grow science communication on the continent. And I think it's a core part of how we train scientists to be better equipped with the tools to conduct research for society and to conduct research in an engaged research format. As we've seen more recently, Scifest Africa and the festivals adapted to the COVID-19 challenges, and this really sustained the momentum for engaging with the public. Significant opportunities exist for festivals, I feel, to expand their role going forward as spaces for engaged research, and I feel that they're well on their way to doing that. Festivals are central to the future of science engagement in Africa, and I feel that they have a pivotal role to nurture the science ecosystem to address the grand challenges of our time together.
Thank you so much, Janice. I think that really gives us an insight as to where we're going in the next 25 years and the real role that science festivals can play and the importance of science engagement in getting across. And the fact is that we really do need to learn to speak to the public and not only to scientists. And we'll take some questions and answers after the next speaker. So we'll have the questions and answers for both speakers after the keynote speaker, which is for the Brian Wilmot Lecture. And this year is being presented by Professor Marwala. And I think we're very, very lucky, particularly in this era of innovation, to have Professor Marwala speak to us. He is the Vice Chancellor of the University of Johannesburg. He was the Deputy Vice Chancellor and Dean of Engineering at the University also of Johannesburg. He was a full Professor of Electrical Engineering and the Carl and Emily Fuchs Chair of Systems and Control Engineering at WITS. And before this, he was an Executive Assistant to the Technical Director at South African Breweries. He holds a BSc in Mechanical Engineering, magna cum laude from Case Western Reserve University, a master's in mechanical engineering from the University of Pretoria, and a PhD from the University of Cambridge, and was a postdoctoral associate at Imperial College. His extensive track record in human capacity development, having supervised 47 master's degrees and 31 PhDs, graduates to completion. Many of these have gone on to postdoctoral studies at leading universities such as Harvard, Rutgers, Purdue, Oxford, Cambridge, British Columbia, and Concordia. He has published 20 books, over 300 papers in journals and proceedings and book chapters. He holds 3 international patents. He's an associate editor of the International Journal of System Science. He's a registered professional engineer in South Africa, a fellow of the Academy of Sciences for the Developing World, Academy of the Sciences of South Africa, South African Academy of Engineering, and distinguished member of the Association of Computing Machinery. He has received more than 45 awards, including the Order of Mapungubwe from the South African government and the President's Award from the National Research Foundation. He's the Deputy Chair of the Presidential Commission into the Fourth Industrial Revolution. He's a board member of Nedbank and also a trustee of the Nelson Mandela Foundation. And he also went to the same school as me, although I'm a couple of years older than him. So I'd like to hand over to Professor Marwala to talk to us on the harnessing creativity, innovation, and emerging technologies to address the impact of COVID-19 in Africa. Over to you, Professor.
No, thank you very much, Angus. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge the presence of our Director General, Professor Phil Madrada. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. I'm quite convinced I'm pronouncing it correctly. I would like to also acknowledge other people who have spoken before me, Anja Fori, and so on and so forth. Thank you very much. According to the African Development Bank 2021 report, the COVID pandemic has prompted a global economic crisis. For Africa in particular, with varying degrees of development, political dissonance, and deep fissures of inequality and inequity, our recovery and roadmaps to rebuilding societies and economies is absolutely crucial. In fact, it cannot be achieved without a strong dose of science, technology, and innovation. Africa's gross domestic product contracted by 2.1% in 2020, the continent's first recession in half a century. In South Africa, according to the revised data, South Africa's economy during the same period contracted by 6.2%. This is indeed a major depression. It is estimated that about 39 million Africans could be subject to extreme poverty and conditions of deprivation in 2021 if we do not devise interventionist strategies quickly. These challenges highlight the importance of science, technology, and innovation as possible good weapons in any scenario of emergence from the crisis and the economic recovery as we take steps towards a new normal. Professor Arthur Mutambara says that we are not going to reach the so-called post-COVID. In fact, we are going to encounter the next COVID. And of course, this requires us to rethink our economy, to rethink the way we produce, to adopt new modes and means of production. And of course, creativity, innovation, and the adoption and promotion of emerging technologies now take center stage as societal problems are of a different nature as we see the impact of the COVID-19. Researchers have compared the pandemic to world wars, civil strife, the Spanish flu, terror attacks, and much more. Arundhati Roy, one of my favorite authors, suggested in the early days of the pandemic that it could be viewed as a portal and that we were now presented with an opportunity to collectively address the rugged terrain of societal problems. The disruptions caused by the pandemic, either directly or indirectly, have permeated across all socio-economic spheres with ongoing after effects similar to the aftershocks of an earthquake. What is it at once? What is at once a bedeviling problem and yet a possible panacea is the existence of the pandemic with the rapidly evolving fourth industrial revolution. We therefore are not only living in an era of pandemics, but we are living in an era of pandemics that is coupled with rapid economic development, with devastating consequences to the world of work, which is going to shrink. But if we are able to harness and improve and adopt advanced productive forces, then this can actually be the opportunity for us to address some of the pressing challenges of our times. Now, how do we harness and draw on solutions as agents with degrees of agency to counter these shocks and aftershocks? In September this year, the African Union Development Agency argued that African countries must strengthen and harmonize innovation and emerging technology policies and regulations to create an enabling environment for Africa's innovation and emerging technology development. It was argued that there was a need to close the gap between policymaking and research in order for better innovation output. This necessarily requires us to create a much richer venture capital ecosystem so that those ideas that are emerging can actually be adequately financed. We, of course, have studied what happens in Silicon Valley, where the risk appetite for new innovations is probably one of the highest in the world. And South Africa's risk appetite on the investment into technology development and taking innovation into prototypes and ultimately into products that risk appetite is actually one of the lowest in the world. And we need to change that. And of course, this can only be changed if the financial sector, the private sector, government and society actually reach a pact on how we can be able to work together in order to create value for all of us. Professor Shirin Assem, Vice President of the Agricultural Research Center and a member of APET, noted the power of technology in providing solutions to some of society's grand challenges. He states that it is accelerating the growing economic inequalities between and within nations, opening doors to new markets, new technologies, and new sources of competition, which spur the creativity and productivity and forming the basis of strategies for economic competitiveness. And this idea of economic competitiveness is very, very important. Because, for example, you cannot explain South Africa's deindustrialization without actually evoking the fall in competitiveness. And many people argue that that fall was because South Africa failed to invest in modern ways of production, whether it is automation, whether it is the technologies of the fourth industrial revolution, such as artificial intelligence, in production. This is really the root cause of our competitive edge. Of course, initially, China was competing on the cost of labor, but we all know that even China today has advanced its productive forces, and much of their production is also done with the aid of automation, advanced intelligent automation. Africa seeks to export knowledge in the form of technology and innovation and create an atmosphere suitable for growth to elevate society. But that can't be done unless we invest in human capacity development. The roadmap that I spoke of earlier is to build and sustain Africa's science and technology capacity in alignment with African Union's Agenda 2063. Christina Duarte writes in Post-COVID-19, a chance to leapfrog Africa's development through digitization, that there are 3 African initiatives which signal a changing of the tide in Africa. These are the creation of the African Continental Free Trade Area with the objective of creating a single market, and this should generate a combined GDP of more than $3.4 trillion and benefit more than 1 billion people. The South African government's creation of a new center for the fourth industrial revolution for dialogue and cooperation of the challenges and opportunities presented by advanced technologies, and the launch of Africa Growth Platform, an initiative by the World Economic Forum that aims to help companies to grow and compete internationally, leveraging the fact that in Africa, entrepreneurial activity in its initial stage is 13% higher than the global average, I close quote. So what more can be done to leverage the moment? As a health crisis of great magnitude, the COVID-19 pandemic has seen the development of more than 120 health technology innovations that have been piloted or adopted in Africa, according to the new World Health Organization analysis conducted in 2020. The study of 1,000 new or modifications of existing technologies that have been developed worldwide to target different areas of the COVID-19 response finds that Africa actually accounts for 12.8% of the innovations. The response areas include surveillance, contact tracing, community engagement, treatment, laboratory systems and infection prevention and control. In Africa, 57.8% of the technologies were ICT driven. 25% were based on 3D printing, and 10.9% were based in robotics. The ICT-based innovations include WhatsApp chatbots in South Africa, self-diagnostic tools in Angola, contact tracing apps in Ghana, and mobile health information tools in Nigeria. The countries with the most innovations were South Africa 13%, Kenya 10%, Nigeria 8%, and Rwanda 6%. What has been amazing in this account is the fit for purpose for the African context. The summative account above signals direct responses to the pandemic itself. How do we now translate the latent potential that exists to deal with poverty eradication, other diseases, joblessness, declining economies, food insecurity, to name just a few of the wicked problems that besiege our continent? At the beginning of the pandemic in Wuhan, images flashed across our television screens of drones in China monitoring people leaving their homes. As the pandemic swept across nations, drones were used to broadcast messages, disinfect streets, encourage citizens to respect lockdown restrictions, social distancing, wearing a mask, and follow good respiratory hygiene. Drones were used to drop medical supplies in remote areas and also used to circumvent supply chain shortages triggered by the pandemic. Further examples from Africa include Senegal, where researchers developed an immune-based diagnostic test for COVID-19 available for only $1, while engineering students built a multifunctional medical robot to lessen the load on healthcare workers. Ghana produced a low-cost COVID-19 antibody test, currently undergoing regulatory reviews. Kenya converted existing factories to mass production with a production target of tens of millions. This showcases that creativity, innovation, and emerging technologies are possible and are prevalent in Africa. The pandemic context triggered multiple innovations, rapidly confirming that the potential exists. What then is the logical argument is that our creativity and scientific endeavors can be redirected to addressing our massive development agenda. The white paper, Harnessing Innovation and Emerging Technologies to Address the Impact of COVID-19 in Africa, published in 2020 by the African Union Development Agency, NEPAD, is a riveting read. It provides a chronicle of the pillars required to contribute to an Africa rising narrative. What is intriguing is the notion of leapfrogging of innovation and new technologies. It sets out 3 stages, which are the essential 3 R's which should be followed. Number 1, response. What must African countries do? Number 2, recovery. How do we rebuild that which has been lost? Number 3, reform. How do we ensure resilience to prepare for the future? I argue that the following needs to be in place for collective, though now nuanced response to the ravages of the pandemic. There needs to be consensus that science and technology is the bedrock for socio-economic development. We have the prospect of building resilient systems. This crisis can be a game changer for the better. Number 1, infrastructure as broadly defined must be in place. Number 2, coherent and enabling policy framework must also be in place. Number 3, revitalizing education from basic education to the universities. And one example of this is the compulsory artificial intelligence course, which all the students at the University of Johannesburg must now take. Number 4, investing in research and development. And of course, Dr. Mjwaka has been working quite extensively in the development, in investing in research and development for the past 20 years. Number 5, trigger and sustain business entrepreneurship. Number 6, foster local, national, and international collaborations and networks. Number 7, grow and participate in the global knowledge economy. Number 8, successful implementation and resourcing of science, technology, and innovation policies. Number 9, diversification of funding sources. According to the OECD report on science, technology, and innovation 2021, the STI system response to COVID-19 has been decisive, rapid, and significant. But the pandemic has also revealed gaps that need filling to improve overall system resilience and preparedness for the future crisis. The OECD STI outlook calls on governments to reset STI policies to better equip themselves with the instruments and capabilities to direct innovation efforts towards the goals of sustainability, inclusivity, and resilience. According to McKinsey and Company, the COVID-19 crisis contains the seeds of a large-scale reimagination of Africa's economic structure, service delivery systems, and social contract. The crisis is accelerating trends such as digitization, market consolidation, and regional cooperation, and is creating important new opportunities. For example, the promotion of local industry, the formalization of small businesses, and the upgrading of urban infrastructure. It is a prerequisite that to return to a reimagined new normal, we need to invest strategically and wisely in science, technology, research, and innovation. The old normal in Africa was marred and scarred by contextual realities that saw significant numbers of our people living not ideal lives. If we are to enter the new normal, we need to reinvent and redefine it. The carving out of a new development path requires the above to be in place with acknowledgement that science, technology, innovation, and creativity must be foregrounded in our approaches to pandemic fallout. There is pressure on us to pursue actively multidisciplinary as well as multi-sectorial partnerships to foster and promote research in our quest for development with social justice underpinning our agenda. We cannot simply live in this moment and obliterate valuable strides being made in pursuing our sustainable development goals. It will be myopic and dangerous if we place this on a back burner. The equilibrium that needs to be sustained is investing for the future whilst continuing support for progress on strides already made. The current estimate of Africa's is around 1.2 billion with projections that it will double in the next 30 years. And this is a huge population that requires huge investments and new thinking. The crisis is that we have 198 researchers per million, which is below the global average of 1,150 per million. The chasm needs to be filled, and our dedicated focus should be on growing future scientists across the continent. Given the extent of the pandemic in Africa, governments should safeguard resources allocated for research, science, technology, development, and innovation. If not, things could indeed fall apart in the future. Even as the pandemic competes with other pressing problems of the continent, there has to be a concerted effort to ensure that science is given the prized place in our continent. During and after COVID-19 crisis, countries, particularly in the developing world, where innovation systems remain fragile, should protect science, technology, and innovation resources from austerity drives. The UNCTAD, which is a body of the arm of the United Nations, also proposes that the resilience and ability to recover from the COVID-19 outbreak will require capabilities in and coordination among not just medical science and public health, but also in a wide range of disciplines, such as data science, sociology, psychology, mass transit systems, engineering, and others. This is the argument that I'm making. We must have the foresight to continue investments, but also careful and diligent attention to fostering and enabling environment for science, creativity, and innovation. This is needed for a world scarred by the pandemic. In the last 2 years, the visibility of science in the public eye, the agility of responses in the fields of artificial intelligence, technology, and other domains must be harnessed. This is not the time for caution, but that unique window of opportunity, the portal that Roy spoke about, where we can mobilize collectively to address societal problems, must be implemented now. African leaders must embrace technology and use the fourth industrial revolution, creativity, and innovation to drive the continent out of poverty and into a better future. We have proven through numerous ways during the pandemic that we have the capability and much more. What then is the blueprint for us to move forward? I think the blueprint is actually science, technology, innovation, creativity, and we ought to have our leaders. A fair amount of our leaders must actually be drawn from this sector. China set a very, very good example for that. The current president of China is actually an engineer. He succeeded an engineer who also succeeded an engineer. And of course, we can see the results of that. Ultimately, this is what made China the factory floor of our planet. And I think Africa has the chance to leapfrog, but only if we invest in education, only if we invest in technology, only if we understand that there is no reindustrialization without using advanced means of production and to invest in data. Data is the new oil, and any nation that is not investing in data economy is going to be left behind. Incentivizing the adoption of technologies in whatever areas of our economy we find ourselves, investing into key infrastructure that is needed for innovation to thrive, connectivity infrastructure necessarily requiring spectrum to be allocated, and ultimately having sound policies that ought to be implemented. Ngiyabonga enkosi, I thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor. That was inspiring, and certainly I think the world is seeing a fundamental paradigm shift in terms of where we're moving going forward with both COVID, but also the dawn of AI picking up speed so much quicker than it was before. And certainly I think the DSI through the decadal plan will be driving artificial intelligence, machine learning, and really the fourth industrial revolution. There are lots of questions. The joys of being the director is that I get to ask one of the first ones. So before we kick in, I'll give everyone a chance to use the question and answer box. So if you have any questions, please feel free to post them in the question and answer box. My first question around the fourth industrial revolution is certainly there's massive opportunities for growth in Africa. How are we going to balance that in terms of the unemployment aspect? One of the questions that always gets thrown out is fourth industrial revolution going to result in a loss of jobs? Or is it going to be able to offset that by growing the economy?
If I can just try to answer that one. So basically, the fourth industrial revolution is going to usher three things. The first thing that is going to do is going to eliminate certain jobs, and it has already done so. And there is nothing new about technologies displacing jobs. We all know about the people who used to be lift minders. These are the people who used to be in our lifts, and their functions was to help you reach whichever floor you are going to, because it was a technically complicated thing to be done. That whole task was replaced by a keypad where you can press yourself. So that job is gone. So the fourth industrial revolution is going to eliminate many, many jobs. In fact, according to Moravec, skills that human beings acquired recently from an evolutionary trajectory are much, much easier to automate than skills that we acquired long time ago, like kindness and like care, But things like reading documents and so on and so forth, these are skills that can actually be replaced by machines. So that is the first task that is going to happen. The second thing that is going to happen to the world of jobs is many jobs are actually going to change. A doctor of today will increasingly use technology to decide. Doctors are now working alongside robots in the operating rooms. So this obviously requires people to be reskilled to be able to work with technology. And then the third, this is the new jobs that are going to emerge. In the 80s, we did not have a job called data scientists, annotators. These are new jobs that are emerging. Now, the question that you are asking, which is the impact of that on the world of work, is basically a question that is saying that what is the balance between the jobs that are going to be created and retained versus the jobs that are going to be eliminated? It is pretty clear that our factories are going to be smaller. Now the question is, if there is a possibility that our factories are going to be smaller, why do we invest in these technologies? The reason is quite simple, is that if you don't invest in these technologies, you're not going to produce anything. You're not going to be able to sell anything, because other countries are going to automate and they're going to outcompete you in the market. And we know what happened to the textile industry. When I was still a student in high school, almost everything that I used to wear was made in South Africa. But if you go to the same high school today, almost everything they wear is no longer made in South Africa, because our ability to compete is not there. So we have to invest in these technologies. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. To Janice, the first question from Zimkita: why are scientists uncomfortable with engaging communities outside of science festivals? And who indeed is the science communicator? I enjoy the
Okay.
end of the question.
Yeah, thanks. I think that there's several opportunities for scientists and science students to, to learn how to write and to communicate in accessible ways. But that toolkit doesn't actually extend to speaking to communities. I feel that the Science Festival has created a space for my students to directly engage, which they would not have had before. But I think that there's a deeper, what I was talking about was engaged research. And while this is not traditionally something that would happen at a Scifest, I feel that it is the right space for such research to happen in the future. So, I think our humanities students, our social scientists, they develop a set of tools or taught a certain set of tools such as community-based participatory research, which we are not teaching our science students. And I think that this is obviously makes our students uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable as a scientist doing engaged research without a set of tools and an understanding of, I think, the local perspective and culture in how we do engaged research. And I must point out that in our research, we work together with the media, with the journalism school and humanities researchers. All of these are really needed in this space. In fact, I think Angus said, engaged research itself and where we are headed here provides a space for true transdisciplinary research. And the science festivals, that's where we come together, the public, scientists, science communicators, and certainly the media. So I hope that answers that question.
I think it does. Thanks, Professor Limson. Back to Professor Marwala. There's a question from Kenneth, and it would appear that Kenneth is the president of Fund and Education and Global Network and Director for a Science Center in Kenya. So this is just one of the benefits of having Scifest online. We've got our colleagues from Africa joining us. Great presentation. How does funding infrastructure affect innovations in our institutions? And what is your take-up of innovator as well as innovation by industry? And what motivations would you recommend for the attraction of innovators to come up and share their innovations with industry?
Infrastructure. I mean, it is clear that for innovation to happen, you obviously need some infrastructure. If I can just give an example, maybe an innovation in the area of artificial intelligence, you need data. There is no artificial intelligence, certainly no machine learning without data, huge amounts of it. And much of that data has to be measured. And this is one of the weaknesses in Africa, that our data is usually imperfect and incomplete. And the world is developing technologies under the assumptions that the data gathering infrastructure is becoming more and more accurate. So we need to get good data gathering instruments that are well maintained. And secondly, once you have the data, you need to train these models. And normally you can't actually be able to do it using your normal computers. One of my students, Rendani, who recently graduated and is proceeding to go to Queen Mary at the University of London, used to go to Amazon, to borrow computing power, so that he can be able to run some of these large models. That is the infrastructure that we require. And later on, he realized that actually the CSIR's higher performance computing infrastructure is much more than adequate for his work. Of course, he did not know about it initially. That's probably why he started off there. So the infrastructure is quite key. getting infrastructure is actually quite key for innovation. Without infrastructure, your innovation is going to be limited. Now, what is the incentives of sharing innovation with industries? What I have often found in higher education is that we're actually quite good at coming up with new ideas. We are even good at taking those ideas into an IP, registering for a patent, US patents. Where we fall short is to take that patent into a product. And of course, there are other factors that researchers don't really have. How do you design something so that it has a good look and feel, so that it does not break when it falls down. And these are people, and this requires people who have spent quite a great deal of time with customers, and they understand customers much more than our academics will be able to do that. So the incentive here is that here you have people with innovation, but they can't really fully take it to the commercial world. And you have the commercial world that probably has that capability. So it's a win-win situation. I think this should be, this should certainly be something to be pursued. Now, innovation by industries. I mean, unfortunately, what I am seeing, and I don't want to be too critical, is that much of the technologies, much of the large multinationals, when they operate in the African continent, they don't really have innovation in mind. I'm quite interested to know what the $1 billion AI Google lab in Ghana is doing, But my suspicion is that it becomes primarily a data gathering research lab, and the development and ultimately into commercial products is happening elsewhere. So that needs to change, and that will only change if we quantitatively and qualitatively train people, educate people, and these people who are educated are visible. They're given the platforms to showcase what they're working on. So without investing, we are not going to see much more innovation in our industries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. There's a question from Mike Booton. I do not think that we are in the fourth industrial revolution, but in the first post-industrial revolution, which has the potential to equip us to undo many of the problems created by the first three industrial revolutions. Do you agree?
He's saying he does not believe we're in the fourth industrial revolution.
No, he says, I do not think that we are in the fourth industrial revolution, but in the first post-industrial revolution, which has the potential to, the first post-industrial. So what he's saying is we're in the first revolution after the first three industrial ones, and we've actually got a new paradigm that can fix a lot of the stuff that happened in the first three of them.
Yeah, look, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily argue about the characterization of which revolution it is. The Japanese call it Society 5.0. The Germans call it Industry 4.0. But I think we are in an era where technology is becoming intelligent, and we, and it is here, we can speak to our phones, you go to Erecha, and you see how the cars that are coming from the production line are produced here in South Africa. It's absolutely world-class. Of course, it is not our technology, but it's world-class fourth industrial revolution technology. Of course, the big challenge is that Why can't we take that to ESCOM? Why can't we take that to Transnet? You know, why can't we take it to the public spaces? And I agree that that is a big challenge. But if you go to many of our industries that are producing our deodorants, these are fourth industrial revolution industries where automation is really much more common than people actually imagine. Thank you.
Thanks, Professor. Going to Professor Limson. A question from me. As a director of an institute, I really start battling to talk to the communications division because they are half my age and are tweeting and all busy in social media and all those type of things. And it's trying to find that balance between what I regard as traditional communication networks and the modern way of doing things. We seem to be producing a lot of in-house YouTube movies and all this type of stuff. How effective do you think that is? And how do you find a balance?
Phew. So we've had to move with the times. So I've had to tweet.
I've just got to get on board.
We have to get on board. And so if we're going to reach as many people, we have to use every single vehicle that's open to us. So it has been a challenge. And I mean, look, for creating a good YouTube video, you need to have collaboration. So thanks to the journalism school, we and some great students, we've been able to produce some really short, punchy, catchy videos, and that has really benefited us. And I certainly think collaboration again is absolutely key if we're going to. It's difficult to learn all these things, but I think if we collaborate smartly with the media, we should be able to get our message across. And I think one of the previous questions was, who is the science communicator? And the traditional role of the science communicator is somebody who makes science accessible, or decodes what scientists are saying. This is at its core, I guess. But I think that these roles are shifting, and so working with the journalism school and people in the media, we think that there's probably a new role emerging for science communicators, whereas before it was going one way, communicating what scientists were communicating science. There's now, and it's certainly something that we're busy researching, is the role of science communicators as mediators between the public and scientists. So bringing information back, and I think that goes back to the previous question about the lack of skills potentially, or tools to engage in multiple different ways. I think that we can engage the media and journalists and journalism students to assist us in this two-way engagement so that it becomes more meaningful. So I think that there will be, certainly our roles have been challenged and will continue to be challenged.
I must say, it's a learning curve for all of us, particularly the older guys having to produce sound bites and people filming you all the time. But yes, I agree. It really does give us a lot more visibility. You picked up on the question, Prof Marwala, about the ability to fail. You're the Vice Chancellor of the University of Johannesburg. You work very closely with the DSI and the NRF. You understand how science funding works through those traditional areas, and obviously so much more through industry. Myself, as a managing director who has staff who look for promotion and are doing all their type of work, I don't see much space for failure. And I think our staff are sometimes scared of trying new things. How would you say the science system or the innovation system in South Africa needs to develop more of an appetite for really pushing the boundaries and possibly failing, as you said?
No, absolutely. I mean, I have actually been studying this topic of why South African financiers tend to be much more risk averse than what you will find in Silicon Valley. And throughout my interaction with the people, I've come to the conclusion that the reason is because many of our companies and our financial institutions are actually run by accountants. And accountants are, by definition, risk averse. I don't want to get into trouble with the South African Institute of Chartered Accountants, But as if you actually go to Silicon Valley, normally the people who are even the CFO, they tend to be engineers, perhaps went and did an MBA, and as a result, they tend to have a bit of risk appetite for technology, because that is something that they probably understand, whereas our banks, perhaps they probably don't understand technology as much as we are, as they're supposed to be. And because of that, as a consequence of that, our venture capital space, even at the smallest scale, is not risk seeking. It's not risk seeking. And if you read the work of Markowitz, Nobel Prize Markowitz, there is always this graph between risk appetite and the potential for big rewards. If you just think of I don't know, maybe SpaceX, for somebody to an individual to actually think that they can actually be able to create a private NASA, which is really what has happened here. You have to have an incredible risk appetite. And if you look at the technology there, you realize almost none of that technology was developed at SpaceX. It was developed elsewhere. It was somebody who was pulling things together and getting the financiers to come and put money. And I think that is what we need to create in South Africa. Thank you.
So, Prof, that's very much on the commercial side. Whether you've got angel investors or investors, but within the higher education side, within your universities and within your SARCHI chairs and your centers of excellence, how would you advise the NRF and the DSI to cope with more of a risk appetite? I look at Professor Limson's work in terms of diagnostic stuff. How risky is it, Janice, in terms of driving your research? And do you think that the NRF and the DSI have latitude for failure? And so between both of you, you can jump in here as to how we coach both the NRF and the DSI in becoming slightly more risk averse if they need to. So first Janice and then Prof Marwala.
I actually, this touches on something Prof Marwala said earlier on about the need for funding, the need for investment in equipment and tools and infrastructure. And I have it on very good authority that the nanomicro manufacturing facility for diagnostics and sensors has in fact been approved recently, and so that's a good thing. And so that means that we will, through this funding from the DSI, be able to do the research and development that we need to do. So for many years, it's been, for myself as a scientist in diagnostics, it's been quite frustrating not having the real tools to actually do the prototype development or to create sufficient batch samples so that we can test and see how valid our technology really is compared with other, sorry, I'm in a room with where the light has just gone off, all space age. And so these tools should be able to allow us to develop and manufacture and commercialize our diagnostics. So the infrastructure is going to be the game changer. Obviously, with COVID, I understand that the funding is a lot less than it should have been, and that we were hoping for in this in the NMMF, let me just put it there. But it is sufficient to get us started off for now. And the great thing is that the students will be able to access access this technology. It'll be open to other people interested in, doing some basic prototyping work. And I'm very excited. I'm very excited about that.
Thanks very much, Prof Limson. Prof Marwala, any final comments to the DSI and the NRF on how we drive a little bit more of a risk appetite?
No, absolutely. What I've actually found, I mean, even as a researcher, is that certainly the NRF is not as prescriptive on what you have to work on. I think obviously where it becomes an issue is the outcome. When you report what have you achieved over the years. And I always view that that is actually quite positive, that I can be able to go and work on a topic that if I was in a private sector, people will say, maybe you shouldn't work on this because we can't see value on this. So there's no limit on that. And so what happens when you fail? I always think failure is actually something that has been used, that has to be used as a lesson for others. If you can be able to turn your failure into, for example, papers on lessons to be learned, then you can almost get away with
your failures.
Yeah, absolutely. Then you can get that. And of course, I can understand that for exact science, then maybe that there's not much room for that. But if you are an engineering, it's an engineering project, and your project is to reduce the noise of an engine, and then you do reduce it, but not sufficiently enough, it is something that you can actually still be able to write about. Yeah.
No, I agree, and I think that with the new decadal plan coming forward, I think that is going to be hopefully be taken into consideration to really learn from where we come from in terms of things that don't always work out that well, so that we can build on them. There's one last question before we go to some more great entertainment from Mombasa, and this is again from Mike Bruton. And either of you can tackle this one. COVID-19 is a major challenge to humanity. It is a minor challenge to humanity, minor, and other inhabitants of the planet, compared to climate change and biodiversity loss. Why haven't we heard more about the environmental crisis? So the question is, COVID-19 is a minor challenge and climate change and biodiversity are bigger challenges. Why haven't we heard more about the environmental crisis?
No, absolutely. I mean, look, this is absolutely correct. The reason is because climate change does not kill you instantly. You will have to wait for a very long time to be killed. It's not direct. And when it comes to COVID, and by the scale of pandemics, maybe it is not even on the scale of, it's definitely not on the scale of the Black Death, and I'm not too sure how it fares if you compare to the Spanish flu, but the Spanish flu almost killed 10% of the population, isn't it? Of the
Spanish flu killed 50 million people, yeah.
Yeah, so that is much, much bigger than COVID is smaller, So the reason is because for COVID, we can be able to count friends and family members who have died. That is really the reason. And secondly, because it has stopped production, It has stopped production. So if you are counting your profits, then it will become much more important. Whereas the climate change, over time, it is obviously much more devastating, but it does not have immediate consequences. And so is biodiversity.
Thanks, Prof Marwala, and thanks, Prof Limson, for some really interesting talks. I think it spurred us all to go away and think a little bit about where we're going in terms of the next decade. Certainly, I think that the DSI and Phil Madrada would want us to have a good think about it. He certainly put out or changed the playing field in terms of where the DSI wants science to go over the next decade. We'll now be going to some more entertainment by Nombasa. So over to Nombasa. Homegrown in Makanda, Nombasa. Wow, brilliant. I don't know how you do this virtually, but give a hand for Nombasa. That was absolutely superb. We now come to the end of our program, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce Monica Newton, the CEO of the National Arts Festival and Graham's Fund Foundation. Over to you, Monica.
Thank you so much, Angus, and good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us at this 20th celebration of Scifest Africa. It has taken a village to raise the festival, as it always does. The extraordinary thing about doing things virtually versus live, it's about the same amount of effort and about the same amount of stress. And I'm the really lucky one who got all the light lifting this evening. And all I have to do is thank all of the wonderful people who are part of the program today for joining us. So Scifest occupies a very special space in the National Science Calendar. It has, as Dr. Mjwara pointed out, seen good times and bad times. And of course, over the last couple of years, all festivals around the world have really had to rethink what they are, how they do it, how they participate, and how they fulfill their objectives and their mandates, especially if you are a festival with a mandate other than selling tickets. And of course, Scifest is a space for education, it's a space for communication, it's a space for engagement, it's a space for inspiration. And I think fundamentally, as Dr. Mjwara pointed out in his response to one of the comments, a really, really fundamental way to inspire a new generation of scientists. And we really, really thank all of our speakers this evening for being part of the program. You inspire us on a daily basis when you join us at Scifest, as many of you have done before in both the live and the online edition. You give us somebody to look up to, you give us something to look forward to. We always enjoy what you have to say, and you are always so insightful, and you make such a valuable contribution to our program. So Professor Marwala, Dr. Mjwara, Professor Limson, and Anya, a long-time supporter of Scifest and long-time friend of Scifest, thank you so much for joining us this evening. We really loved having you. We're also enormously grateful to our wonderful MC, Dr. Angus Patterson. Thank you so much for guiding us through the program this evening, making sure that we stayed on time and we kept to theme and to topic, and of course for handling all of the comments and questions that came through from our audience this evening. The Scifest Advisory Committee members, many of you have joined us this evening. You have seen us through some very complicated and difficult times. We wouldn't be here without your guidance and support. And we bobbed our way through some pretty choppy seas over the last couple of months, and you have been with us always. Thank you so much. We also have members of the Grahamstown Foundation and National Arts Festival boards with us. One of the most important thing about boards is that when we go to them with a crazy idea that says, let's take all of our live festivals online, they get to say yes and trust us with that completely crazy decision. So thank you very much. We quite literally couldn't have done it without your say so. So thank you so much for trusting us and for believing that we could do this incredible job of pivoting at a time when we weren't sure whether or not online was a space that we could successfully occupy. And I think that the last 2 years of Scifest have definitely proved that there is a very powerful online audience, and there is an enormous amount of interest in Scifest, whether it is a live or online event. And of course, our audiences are so important to us. It wouldn't be much of a festival if it didn't have an audience. So thank you so much for joining us all over the world, wherever you find yourself in the country. We were thrilled to host you this evening, and we hope that we're going to see you over the next 6 months, joining us for some of the amazing Scifest programs that we have. We had a wonderful Rhodes quiz a couple of days ago. So wonderful to see everybody participating online. And those are the kinds of initiatives that teach us that sometimes online is actually more accessible, perhaps, than live. Not to be mistaken for better than or a substitute for, but there definitely are applications for online, which we will continue to explore, even though spaces, thank goodness, for live festivals are opening up. Nombasa, thank you so much. You're our homegirl. Thank you so much for joining us, you and your wonderful band. One of the really, really important themes this year links creativity, arts and culture to science and innovation. And we really are grateful that you could join us and just be part of the program this evening. You are wonderful as always, and we know that you're going to do great things, and we will always be there to follow and support you. To the Scifest and National Arts Festival teams, thank you, thank you, thank you. We use the term pivot so lightly, as though it's such an easy thing to do, as though as humans we are built to change on a scale that requires us to drop all plans and 24 hours later do something completely different. We are not. However, If you are stuck in a global pandemic, I would definitely recommend having a festival team with you. Our team in particular are testament to the resilience and agility of the scientific and creative community, and are an example to us all, and certainly on a daily basis an inspiration to me. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. It is just after 8 o'clock. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Kauleza mama kauleza, iyo mama kauleza, 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 iyo mama kauleza, 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 iyo mama kauleza, kauleza, mama kauleza, iyo. Lost I day when I turn nine, lost I day when I turn nine. They shy up fish and chips, they shy up on each other. Marani mugodi ude shapa kapatisa, magwinyali makuna, achali chagalaga. Tishaya pura bose like a denka matuse. bishonile akasake bangu nomalungelo ingabishonile akasake bangu nomalungelo ingabishonile akasake bangu nomalungelo ingabishonile helele tanai helele tanai 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 bo tanai bo helele tanai helele tanai bo tanai 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 bo tanai bo Jesus hey. Dambo ndaka mama esulwe kukuhamba dambo ndaka mama esulwe kukuphakama dambo ndaka mama esulwe kukuhamba dambo ndaka mama esulwe kukuphakama helele tanai helele tanai 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 bo tanai bo helele tanai helele tanai 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 bo tanai bo dambo yaka mama esulwe kukuha